Hello everybody, Dokkan Assets here. Today we are back with another Dokkan battle video, and of course today we are back with another episode of SDBH month, another video in our SDBH month lineup, and of course we have the animation analysis for the brand new units, of course these being the SDBH 2022 lineup. I am very excited to go over these. As you can see, this is actually 2 minutes worth of super attacks basically, which is quite a beefy boy. So we are going to take a look at these. We'll kind of mull over a little bit of some of the more simpler ones. We won't go as in-depth of details, so this video doesn't end up being 2 hours. And I don't really think I need to go frame by frame for some of them. They're kind of self-explanatory. As well, before I get started with this video, I do want to go over 2 things. One, keep in mind, when I am making these videos, I am not a professional, right? I'm not an expert when it comes to animation analysis or anything like that. I just do this for fun, and not to mention, I look at Dokkan essays all the time, so I'd like to think I have a little bit of that knowledge when it comes to Dokkan animations. The other thing that is actually pretty nice about this time around is I know in the comments of a couple of the animation analysis video, people have been asking and talking about, you know, comparing things to the original animation, and sometimes I think that things are a little bit weird when that's just how the original animation does it. And actually, lucky enough for us, and even if I didn't have these, this is going to be a big point of contention for these animations for this video. We actually have the animations right here, literally all of them for these super attacks, I guess except for one of Hearts', because obviously he has ultimate hearts, and then he also has super hearts here. But we have the original animations for these animations from Dokkan to cross-reference them to. So we are going to do that for today, except for Lagos. We don't have hers, but that's okay. For hers, it's like not really that crazy. But pretty decent SA for a free-to-play unit, I suppose. The one thing that I want to say with all of these units, right, all of these super attacks, is, for one, right, I absolutely love SDBH in general, and of course I adore SDBH in Dokkan, right? So I'm going to try and not let my bias, like, influence my decision here, right? Like, I'm not going to tell you that these essays are necessarily the best essays in the game, right? Like, even though I would love to just say that for copium's sake, and because, you know, I mean, I'm a huge fan of Super Dragon Ball Heroes, I'm not going to tell you that these are the best in the game, nor are they really the greatest animations either. I still think that they look cool, and I still, you know, enjoy them, but from a quote-unquote, you know, analytical and more quote-unquote objective perspective, you know, I don't necessarily think they're that great, even though I do really like them. Hearts' animations, I will say though, for the most part, are actually pretty good. They are just about like modern TUR level, maybe not completely there, but they are definitely closer to that, at least from the transformation onward. I think a good comparison for these animations is absolutely, like, these guys are all very closer to unfeatured featured banner units, right? Like the units that release with a new unit that then get put into the unfeatured pool. That is absolutely what the majority of these guys feel like. Hearts almost feels like a Dokkan Fresh from like a year or two ago in terms of the animations. I think that's kind of just like the general feel when I get with looking at these. Now, with all of that being said, what's ironic, that shot is so sick, by the way. What is so ironic about saying all of this is that, funny enough, these are the best looking Heroes animations to date, which is ironic considering everything that I just said, right? And that may just be the title of the video, but I want you to understand from the terms of like Dokkan animations specifically, these are not that high on the proverbial totem pole, right? But in terms of the SDBH animations that we've gotten in the past, these are actually really good. Because they're always of a little bit lower tier of animation. So let's go ahead and take a look at them now. Of course, starting off, we have Lagos here, or Logs, or Rags. I don't actually know what her name is technically, because she has like a bunch of different names for different translations or whatever, but you know, it is what it is. Anyway, Let's go ahead and take a look at her animations here. This one's pretty simple, right? There isn't really too much going on here, like I said in the beginning. You have this nice little flash of blue light to sort of introduce her onto the scene. There is a nice little bit of minimal movement here, but one thing you will notice with all of these animations, I'll probably sound like a broken record by the end of this video, I apologize, is that there really isn't a lot of in-between frames. There isn't a ton of transitional frames for a lot of these poses, right? For this unit, it definitely makes a lot more sense because obviously Lagos is the free-to-play unit this time around, so it makes sense that her animations aren't going to be the craziest. However, I still think overall, right, that close-up shot is definitely very, very nice. Not that one. Yeah, this one is very nice. I like as well, too, this is where they choose to do the little bit of a pose change here, right, where her hand swipes across the screen. That's a good spot to do it, to obviously emphasize that quick movement, and of course her, you know, then like firing the shockwave that then makes the glass go forward. I will say I'm almost more impressed with the glass in this section, because it's really cool how they actually made it look like it's flying towards the screen. Like, it almost looks 3D-esque with the way that they animated it, which I do think is pretty cool. But yeah, obviously, the rest of it is kind of just like pretty basic. It's just these glass shards flying towards the screen, which I do think these look pretty good, to be honest with you. I like this, again, sort of 3D look for this. There's a little bit of minimal movement on Lagos in the background as well, and these little blue effects are pretty neat. Obviously, this essay does look a little bit older here, not just from the explosion effects, but the background. That screams old Dokkan essay right there. And again, this is a free-to-play unit, and it's an SDBH unit, so it makes sense that it's not going to be as crazy. But I think it's definitely all right for the standard that we're putting that out, right? Obviously, we're not looking at these with the same standard that we'd be looking at a modern Dokkan Fest, or especially a Dokkan Fest LR, right? Okay, so we have the boy Golden Metal Cooler now, and we actually do have the original super attack to compare this with. First of all, I do really like this shot here. I think they do a great job animating Golden Metal Cooler, and of course, the lighting effects are very nice here. Obviously, there is a shadow cast from the triple supernova here, which I think looks really, really good. Right, that they definitely did a good job with. A lot of the lighting in these animations, I did notice, definitely was very, very solid. Okay, so we have the supernova at the top there, and then of course, let me actually look back at that shot again one more time. Yeah, it's basically just the sprite of him. The supernova balls do look pretty good, but obviously it's literally just like the far away sprite of Golden Metal Cooler, and that art is pretty gas, though, I'm not gonna lie. Okay. So then after the art, it is basically just like 5 different poses of him throwing the ball down, right? We have, let's go back to his actual sprite here. We have the 1, right, with him kind of bringing it forward. The yucky fade that y'all know that I'm not the biggest fan of. We have the 2 with the then transitioning into him beginning to throw it, and then basically his finger outstretched with a impact frame there before it's actually forward, with the ball sort of going towards the enemy. And then we do have a little bit of a flash with them making contact. I do like this little back shot here. This is pretty cool with the explosion effects in the background. And then very simple, it is literally 1 pose change. I don't know why they didn't have change poses in the actual impact frame, because that would have made a lot more sense. But as you can see, right, he changes poses like literally a frame beforehand. That would have been a way better way to mask it. I'm not really sure why they didn't do it that way, but the explosion effects are pretty good, and I do like this little billow of sort of energy at the end. This little change, though, is not too bad with him swiping his hand down. That's pretty decent. Now, again, I want you to keep in mind that the reason why these animations aren't necessarily like super crazy is because they're basically just taken from SDBH directly, right? As you can see, that is a pretty faithful recreation of the animation on Dokkan's part, even down to the KO screen at the end here. Now, obviously, when it comes to this sort of thing, I don't know why he's fighting Devil Bat here, but you can definitely see that Dokkan, you know, obviously did not have a bunch of in-between frames present for this animation, but of course, this is a game using 3D models, so it makes sense that obviously it looks fluid in that regard, right? It's not 2D animation. So, you know, that's why we're missing a lot of the frames here. And again, that's why these Dokkan animations are always so short and sweet, and also kind of a little bit like just not really a lot to them, because they always take these from the SDBH actual like card animations, rather than taking them from the actual like SDBH anime or something like that, which I don't know why they don't, because that would make more sense to me, because then you could make some crazier animations. Hearts definitely are taking a little bit more from the anime for sure. But anyway, let's go ahead and take a look at Black Janemba here. Again, absolutely could use some more in-between frames for this entire thing, right? Again, I'm going to sound like a broken record by the end of this, and I'm not going to go too, like, crazy with the frame by frame on the first couple units here, because, again, this video will be insanely long. But overall with this one, easily could use some more in-between frames, but I think for what we got, it does look pretty good. And I do like how overall with this whole section here, they do give him a little bit of small movement even in these in-between sections, right? Like right here, you can see his arms moving up and down. You know, when he brings it forward, you can see that even so, he's still moving his body a little bit on, you know, the actual sections that he still paused. So that's cool. At least there's a little bit of something there to kind of give you this illusion of movement here, right? And then when he actually moves his hand across the screen, it's not too bad. Still could definitely use a little bit more in between frames, but I do think the transition at the end here is actually pretty nice, from here to here, right, where it actually sort of looks 3D, right? It gives you that effect like he's actually pointing, you know, like in a different direction, right? Like his finger is actually moving across your vision, right? So that is pretty cool that they have that effect. Definitely very down pat. But I think that is something Dokkan's had for a while. That nice little bit at the end there works really well, and I do like this little bit of the, I don't know what you would call this, I guess just light, because obviously it is Janemba's glass attack that he fires off, right? Of course, we have that attack there, and one more time, you know, definitely could have used a lot more in between frames, but these glass shards do look pretty cool for sure. And obviously the background looks great, because of course this is just supposed to be like the blue version of the area that they fight in this section. But yeah, basically just some basic explosion effects and the same sort of little glass thing going on. It is cool, again, that the background is present for this one. This goes on for a long time, holy cow. But yeah, with the actual section where he launches off his attack, there could absolutely be some more frames in here, 100%. I think with what's here is pretty nice, right? I definitely am not a big fan of this, though, like fading in between one to the other, right? Definitely doesn't look too good. I really wish they would have had him put his arm down a little bit, maybe before they decided to do that, because this is so, like, in your face with this sort of, like, oh, his hand is a lot closer to the camera type of thing, rather than actually when they whip it back here, for sure. But him actually tossing his arm back definitely doesn't look too bad for sure. So let's take a look now at the actual animation real quick. Again, very faithful to the original. Like I said, obviously it is missing quite a few in-between frames. The one thing that is kind of unfortunate, because this does obviously look pretty good, is that this little section right here, where it goes, the camera sort of follows from his finger that has already followed through on the attack, to then obviously going back to his face to launch it with sort of like a hand flying up. It's kind of unfortunate that they didn't actually include that, because that definitely would have been a really cool angle and would have been some nice little bit of rotoscoping, if they would have had this whole section where, you know, it's a little bit of like almost 3D-esque, where it goes from his finger back to his face. Maybe they're saving that for his TUR animations. You know, that would be cool. Maybe that is just me coping. Definitely possible. But it definitely would have been cool to see that added in there for sure. Okay, so moving on to the boy Vegeta now. This animation is actually pretty good. Personally, I like this one better than Goku's, if I'm being honest with you. First of all, I do have to say with this animation, I think overall they absolutely nailed the look of Limit Breaker Super Saiyan 4. To me, this looks like exactly how it should, right? The way that it's shaded, the way that it glows, right, looks literally perfect to me, right? Like, I think that the effects and the color on this one just look superb, if I do say so myself. We have Vegeta, again, gonna sound like a broken record, I apologize, but there are a ton of frames in here where they absolutely could have added a little bit more. Like, this to this is definitely a little bit jarring, right? You also just have the PNG slide back, which is not that great. But, of course, we have the hand sort of move up a little bit here. But he does lift his hand quite quickly, right? This is like a huge jump in between, right? There absolutely, I feel like, should be a little bit more in between that with him lifting his hand up to charge the attack, right? However, once he actually does lift it up, it looks pretty good with obviously the little bit of movement on his arm, and the electricity going on his hand, of course, looks pretty nice too, which will then lead into, I believe, the card art right after this section. No, he does pull his hand back first. That's right. This section looks okay, but then obviously this transition of this is like, oh, baby. That is a little bit of whiplash, if I do say so myself. You know, definitely a little bit of a, whoo, mama. So when his arm is back, though, I do actually like this transition of this because it kind of looks like he's going, you know, and then he's getting ready for his attack. It is a little bit of a shame that there isn't more animation on the attack charging. You can see here, right, there is like a little bit of like, you know, a sort of a precursor to the attack being there. And then as you can see, bam, as the, you know, attack then takes form, it's basically just right there right away. So, you know, kind of unfortunate that they also didn't do a little bit more with the actual attack charging, but, you know, it is what it is, I suppose. Moving past that, though, obviously once the attack is actually formed, it does move a little bit there, and Vegeta does have a little bit of minimal movement on him, which is nice to see. This does transition to this shot here, which is pretty cool, with a close-up of the actual attack. I think that is very nice. Vegeta's hand, as weird as that is to say, also looks very, very good here, too. Again, the sort of electricity effects on this one also look really, really nice for sure. Definitely like this one a lot. We have it explode into green, which I do like this. I do think that the green ball can maybe be a little bit more dynamic, I guess you would say, like in the look of it, right? Like I kind of wish it was a little bit more, I don't know, like jagged edges. By the way, sorry if you can hear that static electricity. I have a blanket on my chair here, and your boy's getting a little bit hot, so I'm just taking my blanket off. But I wish it was a little bit more jagged around the edges to sort of give it a little bit more of a lively feel. But anyway, that light does dissipate, and the ball that remains does look very, very good. I definitely like the way that this looks a lot. It's nice that they focused on this because, you know, a lot of the time I feel like you don't get as much of a focus on the attacks, even though they always look so good. And that does look very, very nice. And then we finally transition into the card art. By the way, quick water break. Hydrate or dihydrate, baby. Okay. So like this whole section here, right, we can basically sum this section up with add some more frames in between here, dog. You can tell that the posing here is just not that great. The one pose change that I think works is obviously this one, right? To then him whipping his arm forward to fire the attack. Obviously, that works just fine because, of course, you know, it's supposed to be this quick, snappy movement of him, you know, firing off the attack. But easily, they could have added a little bit more in between here to sort of solidify how this movement looks, right? I think the attack does look good, and I think that the aura on him looks good, right? And the individual poses don't even look that bad. There is even a little bit of minimal movement here, right? You can see him sort of spreading his legs a little bit when he gets to this section, but just add in more frames, bro. Like, you know, that's really all I can ask for when it comes to this section of the animation. The actual attack being fired off, though, obviously that does look pretty good. I like the beams of light coming off of the bottom there, and I also really, really like the way that the beam actually looks firing up into the sky. This part looks good too with the actual beam, and I love this swirling lighting effects here too. This shot is also very nice. I will say they did do a good job with this. Vegeta's, almost said his fur, his hair is flowing a little bit in the wind. They did animate his tail a little bit here too, which is very nice to see. And obviously the effect, of course, from the energy beam looks good too. You have these nice flashes of white, and again, one thing, like I said in the beginning of this, that is super consistent and nice with these animations is the lighting, the lights cast on the character, right? Vegeta looks very, very good, and obviously he looks a little bit green here, which, I mean, of course, makes sense because, you know, he's having this green light shed on him. So definitely, you know, looks pretty good, if I do say so myself, with the lighting effects kind of pouring all over him. We do have a cut back to this here. Did I see a little bit of error there? Hold on. I swear I saw a... No, it's just an optical illusion. Okay. So we have this effect here with this little X, right, that pops up on the screen. Very interesting impact frame here for sure. But I guess it makes sense, you know, having a little circle around it, and then we were seeing that X of energy kind of swirl around it. So we have this green light explode outward, and then of course this explosion effect. Why is it blue? That's a little bit weird. You would think it would be green, but the explosion effect doesn't look too terrible. I do like as well that the way that they animate this, it's sort of supposed to be like in this like dust cloud of energy. There's these little lights, these beams of light kind of shining out of it. I think that that's look pretty good. The electricity flying off too looks pretty decent as well. And for the normal super attack for Vegeta, what this looks like in game, it is of course basically 1-to-1 in terms of, you know, how the overall animation looks, even down to the angles and whatnot. But again, oh, actually, interestingly enough, for this one, they add more, because it actually ends on the part where it's showing Vegeta's back firing the attack. But obviously here, right, we get this extra shot of him firing it from the front there. So that is definitely a neat little detail for sure. That's pretty cool. But yeah, basically 1-to-1. Again, obviously they could have added in more frames for this one for sure, for the actual Dokkan animation. But I think overall they basically nailed it in terms of, you know, looking like the original animation. Okay, so going back to the boy Goku here. Let me take another drink of water real quick. Thank you. First of all, this first shot looks so good. Definitely like what they did here with the zoom out, you know, sort of going in from the beginning where it shows his face, right, the very nice limit breaker look, to then him being in full body, right. I think that is definitely a very nice little transition there for sure. Looks very good, if I do say so myself. Then, of course, we have the key sort of form in his hand. I gotta say, the beginning of this animation, I think, is easily the best part, because from here on out, it is a little bit rough around the edges. I'm not even going to front with you. The actual part here where the key forms in Goku's hand looks really, really nice. It kind of reminds me in Dragon Ball when the characters form a blast and it goes like, "Pachoom!" type of sound effect. I don't know if that resonated with any of you, hopefully. But with the sort of key forming in his hand, I love that little, the kind of like explosion before it ends up being in his hand, right? The little effects of the light kind of shining off of it, right? The light beginning to glow before it forms into a Kamehameha. These little dots of energy as they're sort of getting like sucked into the Kamehameha is a super nice touch. I definitely really, really like that as well. Of course, like I said throughout this whole thing, the lighting effects are on point for this animation for sure. And I will say it is a little bit jarring going from this to this, from one frame to the next, but I think you kind of don't notice that lighting change as much because you're more focused on the key blast forming, and it feels a little bit more natural in that way, right? However, once the lighting effect is obviously there, actually, it looks really, really good, right? We have a very, like, purposeful, and you can tell the light is coming from one side of Goku and casting a shadow on the other side. And then, of course, right, as the other ball begins to form, you have this super bright light. This looks like maximum limit breaker full power Super Saiyan 4 or something like that. But obviously, these very, very bright lights that now sort of envelop Goku. And there's not really as many shadows, obviously, except for where there kind of needs to be, like behind the cloak and on his tail. And sort of like behind him, obviously, because the light is shining on the front of his body. But a lot more light present now that both of these attacks are there. So very nice attention to detail on the designer's part. And I do like them, again, bringing his arms together here. I do like that. It almost kind of looks like he gets a little bit skinnier, which is a little bit weird. My man's turning into Super Saiyan God. But yeah, he brings his arms together here, which doesn't look too bad. However, oh boy, champ. Oh boy. The rest of this, ow, is a little bit jank. Sorry, I just literally fell off my chair. My arm fell off the rest, rather. Boom, boom, and then boom. At least the turn is not too bad. But absolutely, right, they should have done a better job on these transitions in between the key blast charging here, right? And then obviously this going to this, because the style, I guess you would say, it is like, it doesn't seem like it's a different art style necessarily, but this is definitely a big change for you to just kind of accept that that's going from this to this, right? It's definitely a little bit jarring seeing that there. Like, this individual shot doesn't even look too bad, right? I like that obviously he gets a little bit stanced up here, and that actual animation looks pretty good. But then, of course, this to this is also super jarring. Again, it's not really the animation style, but that pose is a pretty big jump. Definitely not as much as the one from the beginning scene to the second one. But again, right, absolutely could use some more frames in between. I do like Goku then charging this up, though. That does look really, really cool. The zoom in is very nice, and I think, honestly, this to this isn't the worst. There could, of course, be more frames in between to transition into that. But the actual turnaround isn't too bad, right? I think there's enough in there to make it work, right? From it going from the front of Goku to then showing the back of him, right? I think overall these shots do look pretty nice when he's finally stanced up, right? From this to this, right? It's not too bad. It maybe is a little bit choppy, right? But it's definitely not the worst that I've ever seen when it comes to Dokkan animation, right? We do have this nice shot of Goku from behind, though, with the aura also. So, excuse me, it's 3 a.m. when I'm making this video. I apologize. But yeah, we have the light sort of explode right around him, which looks really, really cool. Definitely some nice effects here. A little bit of those like sort of sweeping air effects too that you will see on some of these Dokkan animations. We have the little bit of lightning there too, which is a nice little effect. We do cut back to Goku from the side immediately, which I think is interesting to go from this to this. It definitely felt a little bit jarring to me the first time that I watched these animations for sure. But him putting the Kamehamehas together, I wish it was a little bit more like them actually animating like two energy balls forming together and becoming one, rather than literally just taking two balls of energy and having them layer over one another, right? Like, once it obviously is in one piece, it looks fine, but I wish they would have animated that a little bit better rather than just, you know, having the Photoshop PNG layers slide over one another to then, you know, like form the actual ki blast in his hand. I do like, though, the little bit of detail here that as he squishes it, right, you can see that it actually becomes a little bit of an oval, which makes sense because obviously, you know, the ki in Dragon Ball is sort of depicted to be like malleable, I guess would be the best way to put it. And so, as you can see, right, as he adds a little bit more compression to it, it actually gets a little bit more compressed, which is a nice little detail. And then, of course, as he pulls his hands out, you can see that then the ball of ki expands. And again, very nice lighting effects at play here too. Very big ki ball now. And we get a little bit of a zoom out before we have a cut to this side shot of Goku here. It would have been cool to have some little bit of a more better transition, because now you're sort of going from behind the ki ball to like almost a little bit above it, and then next to Goku's head, right? You have this shot which does look pretty decent, right, with Goku shouting. I do wish it was almost a little bit faster in terms of like how he moves across the screen here. I kind of wish he moved a little bit quicker that way. I know it's slow motion, but like in actual motion it also, you know, kind of gives me the same feeling too. But then of course we have Goku launch off the Kamehameha. This again, in terms of the lighting and the actual look of Goku, looks really, really good. It is, though, a very quick transition. I love this sort of light billowing around behind him, too. The aura looks so nice here, too. Again, I do kind of wish that the Kamehameha was a little bit more jagged, right, in terms of, like, the edges of it instead of just a blue circle. You can see as well that with his arm, they do just literally move the assets down, and they don't bother, like, animating something new for that, right? Even when they get down to here, you can see that it's still the same two arms. Definitely something that an older Dokkan animation would do, for sure. Instead of actually having, like, a more fluid animation to work with there. A little bit unfortunate to see, but it is what it is. And they do actually do something good here with this impact frame being the mask to change between these two positions here. Funny enough, you can actually kind of see that as soon as it appears and the white light isn't completely enveloped Goku yet, they actually have already transitioned to him here. But nonetheless, obviously you don't really notice it that heavily because, of course, you know, the white light is kind of your focus here. And, excuse me, Goku obviously firing off the Kamehameha does look very, very nice. The little bit of effect that they have on the Kamehameha is interesting to sort of like represent the energy moving forward, because obviously it's so close, it's kind of hard to depict that. But I still feel like they could have had those like sweeping white and blue textures, kind of like how they did with Vegeta's attack, right? When they had the actual blast fire off like this type of thing, right? I understand it's green, it's a little bit of a different attack. But that definitely looks a lot better than just having some white effects sort of trying to emulate that sort of thing. We do get a shot of Goku from the back here where he is twitching a little bit about. And the Kamehameha effect does look pretty basic overall. It is a little bit unfortunate too for this section. You know, they literally just took this, they literally just took this zoomed in part and then basically just zoomed it out instead of making something a little bit more unique. I mean, I understand he's still literally in the same pose and still doing the Kamehameha, but you understand my point, right? But the key bowing on him is cool. It's nice, the little bits of the hair and the tail and his cloak moving as well, but definitely very, very simple as it crashes into Janemba. I think there is some decent lighting effects here. However, I will say the Kamehameha beam itself is very basic. I do like these little dots though, and the swirling effect as well too on the Kamehameha also looks really, really good. Okay. Gotta take a hydrate break while we're waiting here. This is the big one. This is the big boy unit, ladies and gentlemen. It is quite interesting to me, by the way. I just do have to know, because I don't know where else I would talk about this, that they gave Hearts the active skill, and he's like clearly the main unit, because obviously he's got a transformation mechanic and whatnot. But Goku and Vegeta are the Dokkan Fest. That is so strange to me. I guess it's supposed to be because, like, Goku and Vegeta are more popular, I guess? I don't know. It's just a very weird way of doing it, for sure. But anyway, as you can see, right, we have Hearts come into frame here, sort of blocking his face. There is a little bit of minimal movement at play already. You can see Hearts' arms moving a little bit before, obviously, he is going to bring them down for the motion that he is about to do, right? Again, definitely could be a little bit more in between here and here, but once he actually puts them down like this, right, kind of flicking them to the sides, that one doesn't look too bad, although again, could definitely be a little bit more transitional frames in between. However, one thing I have to say is they nailed the cubes in this animation, bro. Holy cow. The cubes flying towards Hearts look really cool, and I love the way that they have this little like circle effect. It almost kind of reminds me of like how computer science stuff is like depicted in movies. It looks really, really good with it flying around his hands and feet. Very, very nice effect there. I do wish there was a little bit more of a transitional scene to go from this to this, because this is kind of jarring, right? Like maybe just him even moving back, or the camera just turning to face the front side of him would have been really nice, instead of just going from like bam to bam. But it's not the worst thing in the world. And again, this is the untransformed super attack. So we then have Hearts fly back, and I love this purple energy here as well. Again, a little bit of minimal movement on Hearts too. As you can see, he's sort of lifting his arms up a little bit. He gets into a stance here, which this actually looks pretty fluid, I'm not gonna lie, for at least how far away it is, for sure. We have this little purple bit, and unfortunately, they don't properly animate him spinning around. It is literally just a PNG of him that they're sort of twisting and turning as he's moving from spot to spot. However, I do have to say, the actual effects behind him as they're sort of flowing around do look really, really good. They definitely nailed the whole thing with the cubes, right? I definitely like these little pulses of purple light. Those look really, really good. I like the purple light behind Hearts in this whole section. I think that, honestly, to me, is really impressive that they can do that with PNGs, because it just looks really, really nice, right? The actual purple effect. This is quite jarring, though, going from this basically Dokkan sprite to this full-on asset here is definitely a little bit jarring. I wish there was a little bit more of a smoother transition for that. That could have maybe helped too if there's a little bit more movement on him as well, but it is what it is. We do have then this PNG of Hearts basically just fly forward. Again, we do have this little bit of purple bit and the cubes kind of emanating off of the main ones, which is pretty cool. I think from here to here, they actually do change his position a little bit, because you can see his scar rather is on the kind of like big yellowish chunk of his ear here, and then you can see that it changes shape to be a little bit bigger here, right? It does look like that his arms actually twist a small little bit towards the end there, but it's kind of a shame that it's only at that section, right? And I gotta say, I definitely don't think this is the best use of moving quickly that I have ever seen. I think that this is honestly one of the worst examples that I've actually seen of the sort of like disappearing and reappearing into reality sort of effect to represent moving really quick for a Dokkan character, which is kind of unfortunate. It definitely looks a little bit lackluster for sure. Once Hearts comes back into frame though, we do have him. This flip is actually pretty good, I'm not gonna lie. I actually like this little bit of whoop here. There could of course be a little bit more in between frames, absolutely right. I mean, that is kind of the case with everything that we look today, and it's just very prevalent in heroes in general, but definitely does not look too bad. And of course the purple effects still on point, and I actually like how he moves quite a bit at the end here, right? This little bit of movement with him sort of getting into position to fly down, I think that that actually does look really good. They did a pretty good job with animating that bit of him actually getting into position proper. We do have the card art now. Excuse me, I'm so sorry, boys. Okay, so I wanted to talk about this because this scene does seem very jarring, right? They kind of repeat a little bit of what was there before with him sort of getting into position, which is interesting that they basically reuse the same animation for that. But we have this little bit of an explosion of light here, which then provides as a transition for Hearts flying forward. I feel like I would find this scene a little bit jarring because I always say, you know, that I prefer when they use impact frames to transition between different assets and whatnot. I think I would find this transition a little bit more natural if the assets themselves already weren't so different from this basically sprite to then this fully fledged, excuse me, like asset of Hearts. I think that it would feel a little bit more natural if that was the case as well. It kind of doesn't help that Hearts literally just becomes a PNG that moves forward out of that, right? And the movement doesn't really feel that crazy natural, you know, as he is flying out of there. It is nice to see though that his arms actually do move back a little bit as he's getting ready for the attack. And then as he flies down towards Goku, again, the purple effects are pretty much on point, absolutely for sure. And the cube effects here are insane, right? Look at all of the lighting effects and all of that shenanigans here. It's absolutely insane how much detail they pack into this, right? Oops, we're hitting the slash by accident. There we go. Don't search that on YouTube, by the way. I'm sure that'll give you some really weird results. Anyway, the cube sort of forms all of a sudden in the shaking, which I definitely think is a decent way to do it because obviously you're sort of distracted by the screen shake. The cube itself looks really cool. Again, I like this sort of effect of it, like having these illusion versions of it where it sort of like emanates off. I think that that is pretty cool. Definitely a good way to do that. You have all the little mini cubes appear here too, and the little bit of blue light at the bottom before this sort of explosion effect occurs, and everything is sort of enveloped in all this shaking. And you even see this sort of like cracked glass. It kind of almost reminds me of Hit's attack at the bottom there, is sort of the existence itself disintegrates. We also have this very nice like charred explosion effect here too. This explosion is insane, if I do say so myself. They popped off. This is where all the budget went for this animation specifically, for sure. By the way, I do apologize. I think I did forget to show you Goku. This right here is Goku's animation. Again, it is basically one-to-one with what we got in Dokkan, right? Like even down to the angles with, you know, like the close-ups of Goku's face and whatnot. The only thing that I think wasn't included was this little extra bit right here, was not included in the end. So overall, pretty faithful for sure, right? Like angles and all. I don't think that they captured this angle specifically though. Like transitioning from him moving the Kamehameha forward was definitely a little bit different in the way that they handled it in SDBH compared to the actual animations. Like this angle is definitely not present because I know for a fact I would have screenshotted that. Anyway, Going back to the boy hearts, this is super cool for the transformation active skill. First of all, this shot is so nice, dude. I know it's basically just a static shot. There is obviously a little bit of movement with him moving his hand, and the universe seed actually being animated too does look very, very nice, right? I think they did a good job on that too. But yeah, this shot here is just like, that looks nice. You can tell that's where the budget went for this section of the animation, because immediately it transitions from this to this, which clearly is not the same. And it's also kind of jarring because, like, his scar is not centered on his body here, and it looks even less centered here. Is it usually centered on his body? Let me see this part here where he is, like, standing there. No, I guess not. I guess it's not completely centered. I mean, I guess that makes sense, considering obviously, like, a scar would, of course, not be perfect on one's chest. Yeah, it is definitely a little bit off to the side. Okay. So that's a little bit better, I guess. It still does look a little bit weird here, though, if I'm being honest, with this right here. Obviously, with how low quality this is, you know, it's because they're zooming out on this section. But absolutely, this transition is so jarring, right? Like, even with it being zoomed out, because obviously, you know, it's not at that much in your face anymore. It's still out here. But it's still big enough to absolutely make a difference. And for you to be like, oh, hello there. You're just waking up in the morning too, huh? It is also kind of interesting because this is how they handle them moving his arm up too with this quick transition. Again, definitely not too big of a fan of this. And how cool the universe seed looks. Totally fades away here in favor for just this white ball with a little bit of light outside of it, which is kind of unfortunate. But of course they chose to transition to this asset because of course this is what you end up seeing here, with obviously him pretty far away. And like this, it looks good, right? Obviously because you're not looking at it like this up close and personal. The arm movement could also use a little bit more work too, but I do like the white light that surrounds hearts for this section, and of course these swipes here too do look pretty good. You have the cubes zooming in on my man here, which also looks pretty good. And then, oh, this shot is so good, dude. I know that it is basically just a PNG of hearts that is just standing there, but I not only love the way that this asset looks and is crafted, it literally looks like it's ripped right out of the anime. I'm trying to get it where the blue section isn't interfering here. There we go. Perfect. This looks like it's literally ripped right out of the anime, dude. This is just a screenshot from the promotional anime. It's so good, dude. Oh, man. I really like this effect as well, with obviously the cube sort of covering your vision of hearts with a very nice colors here at play. It's cool to see all of the colors transition as well as the different pieces of the cube sort of assemble around hearts. That is also a very, very nice effect as well. Definitely a big fan of that. This whole sequence is just executed so nicely. It's a very, very nice touch to this animation. Absolutely, you know, kind of brings it all together, I feel like, for sure. With a flash of yellow, we then move to hearts inside the cube, with the light shining off of it because, of course, he is absorbing the power of the universe seed. The cube does look pretty good. We have the light sort of shine as we zoom in on it, and this is a pretty cool little detail. This whole sequence as well is so well done. We have a little bit of a zoom in, which this is kind of like an interesting transition with obviously the yellow, your eyes are sort of looking at the cube, and then in the center where hearts is, but it transitions then into the actual universe seed and then the yellow of hearts' body, which is what you think it is, but psych, it is actually this glass effect that sort of shatters away, which is so cool. Again, the focus of the universe seed, and obviously everything that was around hearts before sort of breaks off with this kind of glass effect, which looks so good. I definitely like that. And with a fade to white, we have a very nice close-up of hearts now in the ultimate form, which looks really, really good. So minty fresh, bro. Obviously, with this zoom out here, it is a little bit unfortunate that this looks so good with the zoom, and then they transition into bada boom, with basically just him lifting his arms up. It's kind of a shame that there wasn't a little bit more transition in between that. He's also a lot more glowy here. Like, he's more yellow than he is here because he's a lot more like goldish there, which is kind of interesting. But yeah, his arms are just lifted up here. And then I believe it has a little bit more of a transition where, yeah, he puts his arms up there, and then it ends the sequence. The other interesting thing that I wanted to note about this too, because obviously this is the transformation active skill. It's weird because in so many modern animations with these active skills, they animate the mouth moving in accordance to what they say. It doesn't always look the best on all versions of the game because obviously it's intended to be the lip flaps for the Japanese version. However, obviously you can kind of like imagine it sort of thing. But it's weird because for this one, they have him open his mouth, right? And then his mouth stays open, it closes, and then he continues talking when his mouth is closed. This reminds me a lot of older active skills, because older active skills didn't bother to animate lip flaps, and sometimes their mouth would be closed when they were speaking. So it almost kind of makes me feel like that this guy was like made a couple of years ago. However, again, I don't think that that's necessarily the case, and I think it's more of a case of course, the animations for SDBH always being a little bit lower in quality, right? Because of course it's sort of like the collab celebration, but also these units are not meant to be animation wise on the level of the big boy units, even though I would love that, and I think that they could absolutely do that, right, if they really, you know, had the manpower for it. But you know, every year they go with a more simplistic look, which absolutely I think these could be 100% better, and I wish that they were, right? It is a little bit unfortunate, but I suppose it is what it is, right? Okay, so now we transition to the actual super attack here, which I actually really like this. Again, throughout this whole thing, I know I'm sounding on my broken record, but there could be more in between frames here for sure. Like here, where Hearts kind of brings his hand up with these individual poses, right? That could be a lot more done. However, besides this initial one here, I think the rest doesn't look too bad. And not to mention, the movement in between the more drastic pose changes does look pretty nice. Raising his arm up doesn't look too bad. And then getting into position here, right, with his arm sort of flicking into place, I think that doesn't look too bad because the snap does look fire, bro. They do a very good job on animating the snap. I think that section right there does look perfect, if I do say so myself. The way that they have his hand recoil, the way that they have his finger move up, right? I think all of that looks absolutely fantastic in the way that it moves, right? Very nice. And as well, the light effects that they use there too. Very, very cool, and a good way to emphasize that little snap with the sort of almost like shattering effect from his hands and the little bit of a circle of yellow light there. Looks very, very good for sure. Hearts pointing up at the sky. We have this little bit of light ring sort of form behind him, with then these little bursts of ki that float around him that then fly up towards the sky, right? Hearts is also enveloped in golden light back there. And the lights fly up towards the heavens above, which this section does look pretty alright. It's not too bad. I like the cracks in the sky that begin to form, but I think this sort of like portal almost-esque effect could definitely be done a little bit better. Excuse me. It doesn't look too bad though, but the assets in the actual portal itself in like the middle kind of remind me of some older stuff. However, the edge does look very, very good. I think that they did a pretty good job of that. And then, of course, we have this orange light. The little swirl actually does look really, really good for sure. I love the little bit of swirl around the edge of the orange part here. That is a very nice touch for sure. And the energy sort of emanating off of this entire thing, too, looks really good. We have the cube come down towards Hearts, right? Very nice sun textures here, right? This basically looks like it's a giant sun, but if it were a cube. Bro, it's the Minecraft sun. That's crazy. Coming down towards the earth. This does look pretty good. We have it sort of come into contact with the screen before this ends up hitting the enemy, basically coming straight down on them. Unfortunately, this is a little bit more of a stinky sprite moment, because I honestly don't think that this animation is too bad, but with how the sprite is, there's not really like a proper animation for them to react. It's basically just like normal, oh no, and then you're getting hit. With the fade to white though, we do cut from white with Hearts having his hands out. Very cool little bit of 3D perspective here again, or you can see it kind of looks like, you know, that his hands are a little bit closer to the screen. The light behind him also looks very, very nice. Anime speedlines is also a good way to emphasize this, because this shot is kind of empty with how dark the background is. So I'm glad that they put that in there to fill out the scene a little bit more and obviously make this feel a little bit more climactic. Okay, so we then have a zoom into his hands. You can see that before we actually zoom into, they do get like almost a little bit bigger here, which is kind of funny. And he does begin to close his fingers a little bit before bringing his hands together. Oh, that's pretty cool. This kind of reminds me, you know what this shot reminds me of? When Goku goes Super Saiyan 4 and he like transforms back into a baby, right? And he transforms into like a great ape in that sort of like dream-esque sequence. That's kind of what this reminds me of. But anyway, of course, again, broken record moment, but could absolutely be some more in-between frames there. However, once he actually gets into stance, I think it does look pretty good. I like this shot a lot. And then the light behind him actually takes a little bit more of the stage with the proper background of that. We cut to the card art, which, by the way, oh, card art is so good, dude. So good for the transformation card art. Absolutely love it. We have him flick his hands out here, right? Again, broken record moment. Could absolutely be some more animation on the actual movement here itself, but the movement in between does look good, right? You can see that they're on the actual like sections where he's hitting this pose. You can see that there is a little bit of minimal movement like here, right? You can see him moving his arms and his legs a little bit, which is nice to see that even though they are doing these like kind of sharp poses, which doesn't look as great, at least there is still a little bit of in-between animation to kind of try and give it a little bit more believability and fluidity, even though it kind of doesn't work because obviously it's still so choppy with those main sections. But I digress. This section does look really good. I don't know why Hearts get so pixely, because this looks just fine. And then you can see my man's got that that Nintendo DS sprite look going on. But the light exploding off of him and this effect in the background almost looking like heaven is so cool. This entire shot right here, right, in this entire sequence looks amazing. I wish that this was in higher quality, because this would absolutely like be the thumbnail and my phone wallpaper. Hopefully it even looks a little bit more high quality in game, because this shot alone is just like, oh, it's so good, dude. It's so nice. The whole sequence to achieve this too, with, you know, after he finishes stancing upright and it explodes, a little bit of movement, the light pouring off of him, the sort of like clouds almost look like they're parting around him, the energy flowing off of him. This entire section, dude, it is just so good. It's just so good. I wish I could have this little bit on loop for just like ever, because this section is just so cool, dude. Anyway, we have the cube make contact with the ground, which I will say this is a little bit weird, because the cube itself looks like a newer asset, but the actual like style of how the cube hits the ground and like the explosion effects look almost kind of old, like how the Big Bang attack looks like when it hits the ground on some of the older Vegeta animations, which is a little bit weird. But we do then get this very nice light effect with these little beams and the sort of little circle of sort of the same effect of this like almost dust, sort of like otherworldly psychedelic sort of look that we had in the section before that I was just going goo goo gaga over, to represent the actual attack hitting. And from a fade to white, we have the beam fly up into the sky, which is nice to see, and a little bit of a scorched earth effect too, which is pretty cool. And as well, it actually kind of moves out almost like the attack is actually dissipating around the area, which is very nice to see. And that is everything. Let me actually show you real quick. We'll look at Hearts' actual animation too, since we have it here. And again, it is pretty faithful in terms of, you know, what Dokkan does for it. It's not exactly the same in terms of the angles for sure. Oh, that last section is so good. Holy cow, that is really quick with the last bit. Look how fast that happens from Heart's like moving his arms out there, right, for that sort of heavenly section. It's basically bam, bam, bam. That is super quick that occurs. It is a little bit unfortunate that Dokkan didn't go for this more of a unique angle here, right? You can see that they kind of go after the lights fly up into the sky. It's almost like you're looking up from the ground at this, you know, attack hitting the sky, right? Whereas with Dokkan, they kind of opted to go for basically just like it's above you, right? Or it's kind of like just in the middle of the frame, right? They have this little bit more of a unique angle on the SDBH version. And the cube as well, also not only almost kind of feels like it's coming at you a lot more with this one, but is definitely a little bit more of a unique angle, almost coming from this like crooked sort of angle, right? Where it's like kind of coming at you from kitty corner almost, rather than the way that Dokkan tries to approach it, which they kind of try to emulate that with this section. But then of course with this, it's literally just the cube hitting it from basically the direct side. So that is a little bit unfortunate, but I think overall definitely very faithful to the original. So let me know what you guys think of these super attack animations in the comment section below. Again, when it comes to the SDBH units, I always try and keep my standards a little bit lower than the standard units because, of course, those are the ones that all the budget goes into, and not to mention, you know, the usual highest expectations are there for. Because, of course, you know, it's the big boy celebration units. Of course, it makes sense for those to be that. However, that doesn't mean that these could not be improved on. Absolutely. And these could definitely be so much better than they already are. However, I am certainly happy with what I have. Again, I think that I can separate looking at them from a little bit of an analytical perspective and my personal enjoyment of the animations, right? Even if an animation is quote unquote bad, right? Big air quotes on that. Or it's, you know, not necessarily as high quality as it could be, that doesn't mean that you still can't enjoy it, right? And I definitely enjoy the majority of these animations, all of them actually. I mean, anything that SDBH makes, I definitely enjoy it, despite how choppy some of these animations may be. They could definitely be improved, but it is still kind of crazy to think that these are definitely the best of the best when it comes to the SDBH animations specifically. I think they do have a lot of elements of some modern essays thrown in there, even if it's just in small little bits that definitely make these far superior to basically everything that we've had with SDBH up until this point. Maybe except for some of the God Trunks and Vegeta stuff. But obviously Hearts' animations, especially the Ultimate Hearts animation and the little bit of the transformation animation are very, very nice. But let me know what you guys think of these in the comment section below. We will be summoning for these guys when they drop, so definitely keep an eye out. I'll be live streaming my summons for that too. And I hope you have good luck in summoning for these units. I definitely cannot wait to see all the polls on Twitter for these guys. Let me know as well, what was your favorite animation out of all the ones that we took a look at today? I would say Hearts, but honestly, I think I really like Super Saiyan 4 Vegeta's animation. Maybe it's just because I'm really partial to the Super Saiyan 4 Limit Breakers. But I mean, Hearts is pretty peak because obviously we've been waiting for Hearts to join Dokkan for so long now, so it's really awesome that we finally have him in the game. Thank you guys so much for watching. I will catch you in the next one. Dokkan Assets out. Peace.